Hello, welcome to the 2017 Point in Time Count training. I am Nikki Paul, Director of Operations with ECHO.
And I am Katie Manganella, the Director of HMIS with ECHO.
And we are here to walk you through this fantastic training so you can be the best Point in Time Count volunteer.
We want to start by explaining a little bit about the background of the point in time count, or PIT count as you might hear us call it. Each year, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requires that communities from across the country do a census on the number of people who are experiencing homelessness in their community. Austin actually decides to do this more frequently than HUD requires so that we can collect information on our evolving numbers and always have a good pulse on what the characteristics are of the folks who are experiencing homelessness in Austin and what their needs might be. Across the country this year, thousands of volunteers will come together to survey people who are experiencing homelessness across all communities in the United States.
For this next slide, we're going to talk a bit about what it looks like to volunteer for the point in time count. As a general volunteer, you will be part of a team with no less than 3 people and be supported by a section team lead. The sections will be identified prior to going out on the count, and those team leads will have already had pretty extensive training to ensure they know where to guide the rest of the volunteers. On the morning of the count, you should expect to engage and survey people experiencing homelessness in a respectful, safe, and impactful way.
The information that you'll help to gather on the morning of the point in time count will be used to total the number of people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in Austin and help us to better understand the characteristics of those folks. We use that information to gauge our progress toward ending homelessness. Specifically this year, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into our numbers on youth homelessness, and we'll use the data that you guys find this year to set our baseline numbers for what youth homelessness looks like in Austin and Travis County.
Now we're going to talk a bit about the type of data that we are collecting on the night of the point in time count. For one, we really want to understand the types of people who are experiencing homelessness and what certain characteristics might they have so that we can further understand and know what type of services they may need. So for example, we would want to know what the person's current living situation is, how old they are. What other types of characteristics do they have? What is their race? What is their ethnicity? What is their gender? Any self-reported disabilities that may be interfering with their ability to maintain housing or employment. Of course, these surveys are anonymous and also self-directed. So unless the person decides they would like to give you their identifying information, all this information collected will be anonymous throughout the process. One thing to note is that it's very important that to the best of your ability, you're allowing persons to really speak and self-identify with any of these characteristics. We don't want to make too many assumptions here as folks, especially around gender identity and race and ethnicity, you might not be able to say just by looking at somebody. So please be thoughtful around when you're engaging with folks that these are the types of questions you want to ensure that they're self-reporting.
You might be curious about who is experiencing homelessness in Austin Travis County. Thanks to the point in time count and the effort of volunteers in past years and the data we have from our homeless management information system, we have a pretty good understanding of who experiences homelessness here in Austin and Travis County. Of course, there are the folks that you see that are very visible that you might see actually out on the streets. There are other folks who are less visible, and those people may be living in abandoned buildings or sleeping in their cars. In Austin, we know that our largest subpopulations experiencing homelessness mostly are individuals. 80% of the population experiencing homelessness are not experiencing it with their family, they're by themselves. 60% identify as being male, 42% identify as African American, and the largest age group is between the age of 45 and 65 years old. Austin Austin has pretty robust data on the history of the point in time count. Since 2009, we have been collecting this information in a way that allows us to compare our results year to year. From 2009 to 2015, the number and the unsheltered count and the total count gradually went down. Last year in 2016, however, we saw an increase by almost 20% in the point in time count. This year, we're making an effort to replicate the 2016 point in time count using the same methodology so that we are able to determine causes for any change in the numbers we might find in 2017. Since we know that in 2016 we saw a 17% increase from the previous year in the point in time count, the 2017 count is even more important. The data that we collect during the point in time count this year will really help us to understand the characteristics of those who are experiencing homelessness and what services they may need to end their homelessness. We use this information to guide system performance and better understand where we have gaps in services in Austin and Travis County. It's also important to note that in addition to the point in time count data, we collect annualized data throughout the year. We know this information from our coordinated assessment process that the number of people who experience homelessness in Austin, Travis County during the year has increased by almost 14% between 2014 and 2015.
Okay. I hope you're still with us. Next up, we're going to talk about the 2017 point in time count logistics. So let's talk about structure. On the night of the count, which it will be Saturday, January 28th, between the hours of 3 a.m. and 10 a.m., we will have 600 volunteers go out to cover all these areas that you see on this map. Depending on how many folks are anticipated to be found in each of those sections, we will ensure there's at least one team with a minimum of 3 volunteers covering that area. In other areas, like the downtown area, where we know there are greater numbers of folks sleeping unsheltered outside, we will ensure that there are more volunteers in more densely populated areas. In addition, each team will, like we said earlier, has a team lead. Those team leads have been trained and have scouted their area way before the night of the count. That team lead will be your point of contact for the night of the count. The team leads will work directly with ECHO staff to ensure that any questions or logistics on the day of, or the morning of, if you will be dealt with.
In the week leading up to the point in time count, team leads will be provided with this list of materials that they will then pass on to you. ECHO will make sure that all volunteers have copies of all the forms they're going to need during the point in time count. We'll pass out resource materials that you can distribute to the people that you find. We've received a donation of bus passes that we'll be able to hand out on the morning of the point in time count. We're also seeking donations for hygiene kit items, blankets, socks, other things that we can give to you guys, the volunteers, to pass out on the morning of the count. We're also going to supply you with flashlights and clipboards for completing the surveys, and we'll be giving you an ECHO hat that says ECHO across the front so that folks know that you are with ECHO and volunteering for the point in time count. Like in past years, St. Martin's Lutheran Church has offered to be our headquarters during the point in time count. You will notice that on the week of the count, we're actually offering a couple of in-person trainings at St. Martin's, and on the morning of the count, this will be the start and stop place for everybody. After you finish the count, and we'll go into a little more detail later on this, you'll return to St. Martin's with all of your completed forms and turn them into our data team before you finish up that day. When you get back to St. Martin's on the morning of the count, there will be staff on hand to review the surveys with you that you have completed and make sure that we understand all of the information that you're telling us before you go. We'll also have staff on hand available to talk about your experience if you would like that.
Also, coffee and donuts will be provided.
One thing to keep in mind is that while it might be tempting to throw things out along the way for incomplete surveys, we ask that you hold on to everything. The reason for that is when you get back to headquarters, we're going to have folks that are going to help you to go through all of the materials that you've collected. We might ask that you rewrite some surveys if we can't read handwriting, and we might ask you to clarify a few things for us. So make sure to hold on to all of your surveys and turn everything in, and that ECHO staff will determine what should be thrown out.
Okay, now we're going to talk about how do you count individuals. So in your packets, there will be two forms that we use during the point in time count to collect this data. The first form is called the census form. This form is used when the individual has confirmed they slept unsheltered that previous night and opts to complete the survey with that volunteer. The second form we'll have available is called the observation form. These forms are used when a person is unable to participate or opts out of participation, but the volunteer believes they slept unsheltered that night. In particular, these are the cases where maybe there's an individual who might be sleeping and you don't feel comfortable disturbing their sleeping or they don't really want to engage. In that case, you would want to use the observation form.
Okay, let's take a look at what these forms actually look like. Feel free to pause this video and go into the PowerPoint to download these forms. Each of these links you see are hyperlinks to our website where you can actually get copies of these forms for yourself. Of course, we'll be providing them during the point in time count, so no worries about making copies ahead of time. This is a glance of what the PIT census form looks like. As we've already discussed, it covers basic demographic information as well as information on where that person is sleeping on the morning of the count, as well as information on disabilities and things that might be interfering with somebody's ability to maintain their housing. There's a very detailed census form instructions guide that we would like to reference you guys to. This will go step by step, including how to introduce yourself and reasons for each question that will answer any questions that we hope that you will have as you learn how to use the census form. Of course, if you do have any questions and the instructions don't answer that for you, please feel free to contact ECHO. We're happy to help. The census form is pretty brief, as you can see. It's really just one page front and back. The data that we collect is data that is required to be collected by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, along with a couple of questions that there has been local interest here in Austin and Travis County to gather on the folks who are experiencing homelessness. And again, the PIT census form instructions will go through step by step how you complete this form. When you're unable to complete a census form with somebody, the next best option is to complete the observation form. Again, feel free to pause this video at this point and go ahead and download the observation form if you'd like to review it now. The observation form is used when you're not able to get data directly from the person who is experiencing homelessness. Obviously, the best data and the most reliable data comes from folks when they self-report it directly to you. But if you're unable to actually ask somebody to participate and you believe that they are experiencing homelessness, or if they've opted out of participation, this is really the next best tool we can use. This form is a little bit different in that it does not collect as much information because it is really impossible to observe a lot of the information that is on the census form. This form will ask more information about the reason why you were unable to complete a census form with the person, where you're seeing them sleep, and then it asks information about what you determined to be the estimate of the age, race, ethnicity, as well as gender. We also ask for some descriptive information of the person that we will use to help deduplicate the surveys once you've returned them back to the headquarters. So, for example, if you see somebody who is telling you that they don't want to participate in the point in time count, but they are experiencing homelessness, you would use the descriptor boxes to write down information maybe on what that person is wearing or what color sleeping bag they might have with them, and we can use this back at ECHO to determine if somebody else already counted this person or not.
Okay, so next up we're going to discuss how to count and what that process will look like. The first step is going to be to read the consent statement at the top of the survey and obtain verbal consent. The next step is to complete the survey with the individual. Do not pressure anyone to complete the survey, and if they would like to skip a question, please let them. Of course, we would want to thank every person who took time to complete the survey for their participation and ensure that we give them resource materials and any of the donations plus one bus pass per person that you have with you. You will be working with your teams to complete all these steps. No one person will ever be left on their own to have to complete all these different elements. Your team lead will be there as a support. And again, please only count individuals you actually see. If you cannot see them, we cannot verify that they were there.
One of the frequent questions that we get from volunteers is, what do you actually say when you're approaching somebody to ask if they want to complete the survey census form? There are prompts actually on the census form that will walk you through some standard language that we recommend that you use. But really the biggest tip that we can give you is just to be yourself and remember that you're just introducing yourself to a stranger.
Now, we do recognize that folks are going to be going out at sometimes the very early mornings where it's still very dark out, and will be going in groups across the county. We want to ensure every volunteer feels safe and confident in their point-in-time count experience. So first and foremost, we ask that all groups always stay in groups of 3 or more, and also always stay within eyesight of each member of your team. This is very important because we really feel that ensuring that 3 people are there, they're really able to be aware of their surroundings. The next step is to ensure that you write down the contact information of your team lead and exchange your contact information with other team members. 3, please wear comfortable and warm clothing and shoes. Bring a backpack or flashlight, water, and your very charged cell phone. You want to, depending on the weather, which it could be very, very cold, or you never know in Austin, it could also not be very cold, but you do want to be prepared for the outside elements. The next step is to remain aware of your environment and exit route at all times. If you ever don't feel comfortable, please, we encourage you to trust your judgment. If you feel uncomfortable or threatened, simply remove yourself and your team from the situation. If you feel the need to call headquarters to check in, you're welcome to at any time. Also, please know that it's always okay to ask questions and ask other team members what to do. Oftentimes, there are many teams with a lot of experience on them and other team members that this is their first count. Please rely on your other team members to support you. The next step is to, of course, respect your team members' comfort level and work together. When necessary, rotate tasks with others to keep everyone involved and comfortable. Please be respectful of space. You will be going into oftentimes people's homes, especially campsites or areas that are outside. You want to be thoughtful and respectful just as you would entering anybody's home. And please be respectful of any individual's choice. All participation for the point-in-time count is voluntary. No one is forced to participate. While you are encouraged to wake people up, oftentimes people bring bells, talk loudly, clap, do kind of things to make their presence known. Please do not touch anyone. And if someone does not want to participate, of course, please respect their choice. Complete the observation form instead. One thing to note, if you do encounter any dogs while counting in a rural area, please remain calm, take cues from the owner if possible. Do not continue further if you are not sure it is safe. Of course, if there is an emergency, please call 911. After calling 911, please call headquarters to inform them of the emergency situation. Also, last but not least, while we all love to take photos, this is not the time. Please do not take any photos of people you survey or their campsites. You can take some selfies of your team, but not the campsites.
Team leads have been working since November on the outreach and scouting of the sections that you're going to be covering on the morning of the count. Efforts are being made to make sure that we don't duplicate any count efforts. Specifically, all sections cover separate areas. There is no overlapping turf, if you will. And we have also changed the section boundaries this year so that major roadways like I-35 are covered by one section instead of 2 sections. You will know where to go by really working with your team lead and using your own knowledge of the area that you are scouting for the morning of the point in time count. We can tell you where people were found last year. If you follow the link to the Google map, you will see some pins that will tell you where people were found in your section last year. Here's what that looks like. In the Google map, you're actually able to zoom in and look at your section and where people were found. Each pin represents at least one person, and in some cases actually represents more than one, such as a campsite. We often get questions on where to look while you're scouting and on the morning of the point in time count. Depending upon what section you're in, it's going to look very different for you. If you're in an area where folks are going to be sleeping under bridges or on streets or behind buildings, homelessness may look a little bit like this. You can see up underneath the bridge there are sleeping bags, mattresses, blankets. That's usually a pretty good indicator that somebody is sleeping there or has been recently. Behind the building, this might be something that you'll see. So here you're going to notice there are blankets, pillows, mattresses, bags. This is obviously a sign that somebody has been sleeping here recently. If you're in a more rural area, you're probably going to find yourself off of the beaten path a little bit. Things that you can look for, and we really recommend that you do this before the morning of the point in time count because you need to know where these paths are going in. You can look for paths off of roadways that don't really seem to go anywhere. That's a sign that somebody has been walking that path frequently. You can also look back into little kind of tucked in areas in trees where people might be able to set up a tent or be able to live undetected. Team leads, again, have been doing some of this scouting already, and we don't ask that general volunteers take on this responsibility, but we do ask that if you know of any areas that look like this in your section, that you relay that on to your team lead. These pictures are examples of what campsites look like in the woods. This is an example of a more elaborate and established campsite. Not all campsites look like this, but some do. It's important to be aware that if you're going into a really well-established campsite, they probably have a system set up for visitors to announce themselves. So be aware of any signs that are alerting you as you're walking up, or any bells, or anything that the person who is living here has set up so that you can let them know that you've arrived.
As Katie mentioned, all your team leads for your assigned section will have already been scouting the area. This scouting is very important, so we have a further understanding of where specifically people might be on the night of the count so that you can have a really targeted and focused point in time count outreach strategy. So in addition, we would want to make sure that if you have any information on the whereabouts of individuals who might be sleeping unsheltered in that specific area, please feel free to contact your team lead and let them know. The more information we have ahead of time, the better. Also, if there are any people in your area ahead of time, please let them know if they're aware of anyone that might be sleeping unsheltered. For example, if you know the person at your local gas station, these are the places that you can ask and see if you can get any additional information if they know any persons who might be homeless.
There are a couple of frequently asked questions that we get that we have not been able to cover at other points in this training, and we wanted to mention them now. The first is, how much time are you committing as a volunteer? The good news is that you are already almost an hour into your first commitment, which is completing the training. The morning of the count, you can expect to spend about 4 to 5 hours. The total commitment is about 6 hours. Where will the count take place? Where do I go on the day of the count? This is information that you're going to work out with your team lead ahead of time. In the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about next steps, so we'll cover more detail there. Do you need a car? Volunteers are not required to have a car, but it's often helpful. If you are able to drive on the morning of the point in time count, let your team lead know that.
Here are some next steps as a volunteer. So now that you have completed the point in time count training, you need to print and sign the volunteer release form. If you are in the video version of this training, you're going to need to exit out of this and open up the PowerPoint or open up the attachment to download the volunteer release form. Once you have signed that, email a copy of it to pointintime@austinecho.org. This is going to be your verification that you have completed this training. You should be hearing from your team lead soon if you haven't already, and if you haven't heard from your team lead by January 15th, please let the ECHO volunteer coordinator know. We recommend that you work with your team lead to develop a strategy and game plan for covering your section during the count, so that's something that you can start working on now. If you have any questions at all, your team lead is a great resource, or you can always reach out to us here at ECHO. The volunteer coordinator is Casey Cork, and she can be reached at caseycork@austinecho.org.
All right, y'all, we did it! Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this entire beautiful PowerPoint. We are so grateful for your help and your dedication to ending homelessness in Austin-Travis County. We are so excited to see you on the morning of the point in time count.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.